Now we will discuss about the measure of the government deficit, or you can say measure of government budget deficit. Actually, it can be the budgetary deficit can be three types: revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, and primary deficit. So, first of all, I will explain the definition of the budgetary deficit. Then we will discuss all these three types: revenue, fiscal, and primary, in detail. So, first of all, we will discuss about the budgetary deficit is defined as an excess of the total estimates expenditure over all estimates revenue. When the government spends more than it collects, then it incurs um, a budgetary deficit, which reference to the budget of Indian government into a three types. These are revenue deficit, first of all. So revenue deficit is concerned with the revenue expenditure and the revenue receipt of the government. It refers to the excess of revenue expenditure over revenue received during the given fiscal year. Its formula is revenue deficit equals to revenue expenditure minus minimum revenue receipt. So the revenue deficit signifies that the government's own revenue is insufficient to meet the expenditure of the normal functioning of the government department and provision for the various services. So now we will discuss about the implications of the revenue deficit. It indicates the inability of the government to meet the regular expenditure or recurring expenditure, or you can say those who are proposed in the budget, they are not able to complete those expenditures. So that is the thing. It implies is that the government is dissaving, that is government is using the saving of the other sectors to complete the financial expenditures. So that is also very, very bad for the expenditure, for the budget. It also implies that the government has to make up the deficit from the capital receipt, that is through the borrowings and disinvestment. Nowadays, what the government is doing for doing their for completing their expenditure, most probably they are doing the privatization. They are saving the department, government department or other sectors to the foreign countries or in our own country. So that is disinvestment. So it means revenue deficit either leads to increase in liability in the form of a borrowing or reduce the assets of the through the government. Next, use of the capital receipt for meeting the extra consumption expenditure leads to an inflationary situation in the economy. The high revenue deficit gives a warning signal to the government to either curtail its expenditure or increase its revenue. So they are doing disinvestment for that. Next is physical deficit. What is meant by physical deficit? So the physical deficit represent a more comprehensive view of the budgetary imbalances. It is widely used as a budgetary tool for explaining and understanding the budgetary development in India. Physical deficit refers to the excess of the total expenditure over total receipt, including borrowings during the given fiscal years. Okay. Its formula is physical deficit equals to total expenditure minus total receipt, including the borrowings. And you can say the extent of the physical deficit is an indication of how far the government is spending beyond its means. Implications, debit trap. Physical deficit indicates the total borrowings required for the of the government. Borrowings not only involve repayment of the principal amount but also require payment of interest. Inflation, government mainly borrows from the Reserve Bank of India to meet its physical deficit. RBI prints new currency to meet the deficit requirement. It means the money supply in the economy and creates the inflationary pressure. Next is foreign dependency. Government also borrows from the rest of the world, which rises its dependency on the other country, or it will be doing the fall in the value of money. Next is the what are the hampers of the features growth? Borrowing increasing in the financial burden for the further generation. Now, sources of a financial physical deficit. Borrowing physical deficit can be met by borrowing from the internal sources like public commercial bank, external sources from the government banks. Deficit financial printing on new currency. Government may borrow the RBI against its securities to meet the physical deficit, and RBI issues a new currency for this purpose. This process is known as the deficit financing. Next is primary. Primary deficit refers to a difference between the physical deficit in the current year and the interest payment on the previous borrowing. So its formula is primary deficit equals to physical deficit minus interest of interest payment. Implications. What are the implications of the primary deficit? It indicates how much of the government borrowings are going to meet expenses other than the interest payment. The difference between the physical deficit and the primary deficit shows the amount of interest payment on the borrowing paid by in past. So a low or zero primary deficit indicates that interest committees or have the force the government to borrow. Primary deficit is the root cause of physical deficit. In India, interest payments are considerably increasing in the recent year. Highly interest payment on the past borrowings and have generally increased in the physical deficit. To reduce the physical deficits, interest payment should be reduced through the repayment of loan as early as possible. So here in this chapter, we will discuss about the government budgets and the economy. Any doubt, please clear to.